Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. It's viewers' orchid question time. Number 4, I think. We didn't actually have one last week because I only had a couple of questions that didn't really warrant doing a video, which I brought forward. They haven't been dropped. They've just been brought forward to when I've got a sufficient number to make it worthwhile doing a video. Now this first one, I've made notes. Kath, I'm not sure how I'm going to pronounce this, Bergvist, Bergkvist. The K just seems odd in my language anyway. She asked about the naming structure. Now I'm reasonably sure she meant from the genus downwards, but I'm going to start higher up. All plants come down from a hierarchic tree, starting at a very one word that gradually spans out. And as far as our branch is concerned, it actually starts with, I'll do pop-ups so you can see the words. It starts with Orchidaceae. So everything under there are orchids. Yeah? So that's our high level word. Everything under that is what we're interested in as far as orchids are concerned. And the next level down, so Orchidaceae is the family, our family group. Yeah? The subfamily under that is Epidendroideae. And looking at the history, once upon a time, all orchids were classed as epidendrums, the whole lot. We've moved on a bit since then, so that's the subfamily. I'm specifically going down this path because somebody asked me about, they weren't sure why epidendrums were in the Cattleya alliance. Well, we'll get there in a minute as we work down the family tree. So we've got Epidendroideae, you can say that, it's a mouthful, isn't it? And then underneath that we've got the tribe, which is Epidendrae. These words are similar, yeah? And then underneath that is the subtribe, and this is where we get to find out why our epidendrum is actually in the Cattleya alliance, which is slightly misnamed, because the next level down is Leilinea, yeah? Which is effectively the level at which the Cattleya alliance live under. Yeah? But the next level down from there, so that's the subtribe we've got to now, the next level down from there is actually Epidendrum, which is the genus. But as I said, the Cattleya alliance is slightly misnamed. It ought to be really called the Leilia alliance, given that structure and the downward path. But living under that Leilinea is literally the Cattleyas, the Laelias, the Epidendrums, the Encyclias, Brassivolas, whole set of them, yeah? That's the Cattleya alliance as it's generally known, as I said, slightly misnamed. So that gets us down to the genus. Right, now, the naming standards and structures, once you get to genus and head downwards, has been standardised by the RHS. The American Orchid Society have slight differences, and anyone outside the States takes no notice of that, as opposed to the RHS is used their standards in most of the rest of the world. I know which one I'm going with. Right, so you've got the standards for naming, and also in amongst that is the way they ought to be written. And I only do half of it right. If you've got an orchid species, let's say Oncidium sotoanum, if you are going to write that anywhere, including on the label, it should all be in italics. So both the genus and the species should both be in italics. Now I tend to put the genus name in upright letters and the species in italics. Yeah, as opposed to a hybrid, yeah, which would have, in RHS terminology, the genus would still be in italics, yeah, but the hybrid name would be in upright text. Yeah. I tend to put the genus name in upright text, so a hybrid with me would all be in upright text. I am doing it wrong. I just like the look of it that way. But I got told off literally in the Orchid Society's magazine that I'm responsible for, because I carried forward my ideas and promptly got by several people. Do it right, you know, as it's a magazine for production, you know, to go out to many people. What you do in your own little world and how you write your tags is entirely up to you, but it could get frowned on if it ever makes it to a show incorrectly written. Right, then we've got, let's take my Laelia purpurata, if it's still even called Laelia. I think that's Cattleya now. But to be written correctly, the words are Laelia purpurata variety, yeah, or variation, abbreviated to VAR with a full stop, atropurpurea. Now, technically speaking, the whole lot of that should be in italics except for the VAR, which should be in lowercase upright text. Because we haven't done that yet, have we? A genus should start with a capital letter, yeah? A species should start with a small letter, yeah? And all of it should be in italics, effectively, yeah? A hybrid, the genus again, starts with a capital letter but in italics, and then the hybrid name would start with capital letters for each individual word that's in it, yeah? Sometimes it's more than one word. They should all start with capital letters unless they're hyphenated, and they would be in upright text. Now, what about a clonal name? Yeah, because you do get those as well. Think of one, Roger. Come on, get your head together. Oh, here's one. We could have a look at this one because it's rather long. Now, the name of this, if I just read it out, is Cattleya Shinfong Little Sun Young Min Golden Boy. But it is broken down into sections. Cattleya, that's the genus. So it's a hybrid now, but technically the genus should be in italics with a capital C. Yeah? And then we get to Shinfong Little Sun, which is actually the hybrid name. But unfortunately with this one, there are more than one type of hybrid called Shinfong Little Sun. Several have been produced with that name, so they've got what I call a clonal name, which is the bit afterwards that goes in quotes, single quotation marks, yeah? So this is Shinfong Little Sun, 3 words, all with capital letters, all in upright text, followed by single quote, in this case, young hyphen min, yeah? Again, upright text, capital letters, and then golden boy, separate words, capital letters, upright text, followed by close the quote, single quotation mark. That's about as elaborate as it gets, quite honestly. There is one exception to the rule. Primary cross, yeah? Okay, now there are times when that could be Cattleya something or other crossed with Cattleya something or other. You are allowed to miss the second Cattleya word out because it should be obvious. So Cattleya so-and-so crossed with so-and-so. You can do that. And technically all of that would be in italics. And the Cattleya would be the only capital letter on the front of that. Following this? Bored yet? Because I am. And there is another little exception that occurs in the wild. And that's where a hybrid exists in the wild and it naturally occurs. Yeah? And under normal circumstances it will be given a name. Yeah, so we've got 2 species naturally crossed together with their own name at that point. So the hybrid's given a name, but it's lowercase, no capital letter, even though it's a hybrid, and it's preceded by an X to signify it occurs in the wild. There aren't many of them. I've got one, which is delicatum. Dendrobium delicatum should be written all in italics. Not sure whether the X is, but you wouldn't notice anyway, would you? So Dendrobium in italics, capital D, followed by X delicatum, lowercase italics. Yeah. So that's the sort of naming standards. I can't think of anything else, but the alliances are basically generated normally at sub-tribe level, because the lower level immediately below sub-tribe is genus. Yeah, so that's where the alliance names often come from, but some of them are just made up. So that's all that lot. As I said, American Orchid Society, AOS, have slightly different rules and standards, but they only apply in America, I'm afraid. As soon as you move away from that continent into another world, or the rest of the world, it's the RHS standards that are normally adopted. And I say normally because there still may be other countries who do their own thing. Why not? Your country, do what you like. Allegedly. Right, the next one was asked by two people, Carol Sykes and Maxine Evans, and they asked about winter care specifically for Coelogyne nitida, which used to be all Crassia, I believe. What should you do about the fact that spikes can start halfway through the winter and then stop? My Coelogyne cristata did that. In fact, it's still doing it, because although one spike pushed on and bloomed, the other spike still sat there doing nothing. Yeah? A lot of Coelogynes are like that, but not all. Most Coelogynes are cooler growers naturally and prefer to be even cooler in the winter, and some of them would get a drier period in the winter as well. As far as light's concerned, it varies from plant to plant. Yeah, it depends where they come from. Depends whether they're growing out more in the open but higher up. Yeah, you don't tend to find many orchids growing out in the open lower down because it would be hot in full sun. But the higher up you go, you can be in full sun and not be hot. You can still be cool. Go skiing, you'll find out. Yeah? So just because a plant is in the open doesn't mean to say it's a warm grower. It can still be a cool grower. And then you come into whether it's in an area where there's deciduous trees, which would give summer shade and winter light. So you do have to look at individual plant level. But winter care for me, I've only got 3 types of Coelogynes, have I? Or have I got 2? No, I've got 3. Winter care for my Coelogynes is virtually the same as my Dendrobiums. They get less water, no feed, and I don't let them stay dry for too long, and I watch for any form of desiccation within the bulbs, and if I see any, they'll get a drop of water. That's my winter care. And everybody's cooler in winter out here, whether they like it or not, and some don't like it. So that's that. But as far as those early spikes are concerned, some Coelogynes will push those spikes up quite early, and naturally they stop growing until their actual blooming period, and it normally is triggered by a slight rise in temperature and longer days, and then they'll kick on and bloom. They don't all do that. I mean, my Moriana, that starts a new growth, and as the new growth just starts to break at the top, the spike comes straight out the top and blooms immediately, and the bulb hasn't even formed yet. So there are differences, and that seems to do it when it likes. Doesn't seem to have a season. So that's that one. Have I got any on here I can't answer? I hope not. Should have read them through, shouldn't I? Right. Michael McCarthy, very simple one. Have I still got any orchids on my wish list? No, except for a decent sized Victoria Regina. That's it. There is no wish list anymore. My wish list consists of seeing something I really fancy. And sometimes my wish list will be triggered by seeing something at a show. So it's like an old wish list entry that's been forgotten and brought forward again because I've seen another version of it. But technically at the moment, at this point in time, apart from that Victoria Regina, there is no wish list. Yeah, it's just a matter of, this year I started a new genus. I went through the sort of things I could delve into, came up with what I did, the Renantheras, and there was an S on the end. We'll do that later. You get no more. Subtle hint. Yes, so not really a wish list anymore. Jessica Wood, or is that Ward? No, it's Wood. It's my writing. I should have been a doctor. Asked about some other orchid types, apart from Phalaenopsis, for northeast facing windows. Well, what you're looking at there is, depending on how close you get to the window, medium to bright light. The farther you move away, getting down to quite heavy shade. But what you're not going to get on a northeast facing window is sun. You might get a little bit last thing at night. Sorry, it'll be first thing in the morning. I'm doing me east and me west is back to front. I'll be doing left and right wrong in a minute. Yes, northeast sunrise. Crack of possible light first thing in the morning, only probably in the 2 months of midsummer, either side of Midsummer's Day, when the sun is rising its farthest east. You might just get a crack. But under normal circumstances, no sun. Yeah? Orchids that will grow in that are virtually all of the cool growers. So Masdevallias, Draculas, Restrepias, Dendrochilums, Coelogynes, all these would grow in that light, but what they won't grow in is dry air. And therein lies the problem with anything growing in the home, apart from Phalaenopsis, who just seem to put up with it, is the humidity level is difficult to maintain in a home at the level that a lot of orchids would like. You could try some Oncidium types, those that like the lower light levels. Phalaenopsis, not the easiest to grow, but they don't like bright light, but they need that humidity. Nelliilas, anything that looks remotely like an Odontoglossum in amongst the intergenerics. I'll put a couple of pictures up at this point so to get a feel of the look. There is a look about them. They tend to be, don't need the bright light. And none of those are warm growers. They're not warm to hot. They're up the intermediate downwards level. So the middle of intermediate as far as their highest temperatures are concerned, and they can get quite cool and be quite happy. There are some Dendrobiums that are classed as cool growers, but some of those are highlight orchids. You probably won't get away with highlight orchids on a northeast window. There are some Cattleyas that don't like that highest light. The one that springs to mind that I've got is the Ivanagara apple blossom. You put that in the same light, well, I put that in the same light as my other Cattleyas and burnt it promptly. So that one doesn't like it too bright. So there's some choices. There's a fair bit in the Oncidium range that you could do okay with there. So that's that. But your Phalaenopsis are going to probably do best because they're not so fussy on the humidity. They'll put up with it a lot lower than many other orchids. And that's right, that light's just right for them. Yeah. They do like to be warmer though. Out of all those I've just mentioned, the Phalaenopsis are up the warmer end of all of those. Phalaenopsis by definition has hot steamy jungles. Yeah? So quite high humidity with high temperatures. But the hybrids have had that knocked out of them. There are a couple of species that are cool growers, but not many. Right, so that's that. This one's a funny one. It's a funny channel name. CBR6F2. I don't think you can actually say that. It's probably somebody's initials or something, I don't know. Does water and nutrients travel along rhizomes to older parts of the plant? And how does cutting said rhizomes generate new growth? Right, a little bit of complexity and some easy stuff. First of all, water, as in hydration, is capable of travelling from the roots to all parts of the plant. Yeah? That's it. So it can go everywhere. However, if it's nutrient laden, yeah, at first, when it first gets in through the roots, it's capable of going to all parts of the plant. But then we get into the mobile nutrients and the non-mobile. The non-mobile nutrients get dumped in a certain place and left there and they cannot move. Yeah? So if, for instance, some calcium went to one of the older leafless bulbs, which is fine because they're there to store nutrients, yeah? And let's say a new growth is pushing on that could do with some nutrients and the plant's a bit short, it will go and find those nutrients in other parts of the plant and drag it along the rhizome via the hydration, the water elements, to get to where it wants it. Unfortunately, it can't have that calcium because it's a non-mobile one. So yes, they can move, but not all of them once they're placed. In other words, once the decision's been made to use that nutrient for its function. The non-mobile ones are then frozen, they stick. So yes, they can move. And plants have hormones. I'm not going to name the individual types, but a lot of these are in the kelp seaweed stuff, yeah? It's got lots of them in there, that's why people use it. Nutrients are elements to do stuff with. They help the plant do things. You can think of hormones as a set of instructions as to what ought to be happening in that part of the plant. Yeah? So when a plant decides to put up a new growth, there's a concentration of hormones in that area that tell the plant, here is where the new growth's going to be. Let's get on with it. Yeah? And we'll need some of those nutrients to do it. So yeah, so it's a combination of things going on. You get concentrations of different hormones in different parts of the plant at different times in its life cycle. Yeah? Cattleyas, for instance, when they finish blooming, and they, it's the time we just think, oh, it's finished blooming now, it should put up a new growth. There'll be a concentration of growth type hormones in the area where that needs to grow. Yeah? And as it grows, yeah, it'll want some roots. Yeah? So there'll be a concentration of the set of instructions that say, let's get some new roots to go with this growth. And then when it's mature, there could be a concentration at the apex to say, if we want this plant to survive long term, we need some seed. So we're going to need some bloom. So let's start some buds or spikes. Now, these hormones differ and are concentrated in various places. I'm not going to say they move around the plant because I'm not sure they do, but they concentrate in certain areas. Some of them force things to happen. Some of them stop things happening. In my bonsai world, every tree wants the top of the tree to be the apex, yeah? And it puts down suppression hormones to stop buds growing lower down because it wants the ones at the top to reach for the sky. So they can work both ways. So yes, they do travel around. When you cut a rhizome, the best time to do it is when there is growth going on that rhizome, because you know at that point there will be a concentration of those types of hormones. And plants have the ability to recognize damage. If you've got a mature tree and you saw it off 6 foot from the ground, in not too much time afterwards, you will get a massive set of growths just below that cut, of new growths, masses of them. The tree has recognized something's gone wrong and it's now got no leaves. So if it needs to survive, it needs some more. So it will push them out lower down. You can play games with that with bonsai as well. Where did I get to? Yes, so when you've got a concentration of growth type hormones in a rhizome, cutting it does two things. The plant says, uh-oh, the back end of the plant says, oh my goodness, I've lost my growth area and my ability to produce seed and survive. So if this bit of me is going to survive, I need a new growth. And it will actually generate an eye to get a growth going where there wasn't any, to try and get that part of the plant to survive. And the more a concentration of those type of hormones there are in that part of the plant, the more likely you are to get that growth to shoot out. And another question that came up that's linked is, if you cut a rhizome on, say, a nice cattleya, and it shoots out from behind, can you still put it in a show? And technically the answer is no, because it's now two plants, unless you don't cut the rhizome right through. Yeah? So that's that. So, Yes, the new areas of growth following damage is all to do with the plant recognising the damage and using these hormones to get the thing to grow. That one I'm going to leave, and that one I'll do. Pat, how do I say that? I can't, sorry, I just had a brain dump. It's SFREUND. It almost sounds like friend, yeah? Anyway, Pat asked orchid types and how and where they bloom from, by type, yeah? Right, going back to our Cattleya alliance, with very, very few exceptions, Cattleyas push their buds and or spikes straight out the top of a pseudobulb from where the leaf joins the pseudobulb. There are very few that don't do that in the Cattleya alliance, yeah? So that's those out of the way. Oncidium types push their spikes out. I won't say buds this time because virtually across the board the Oncidium alliance produces spikes, so they're multifloral. But some Cattleyas push buds straight out the top, don't really have a spike, sometimes just one. Yeah. But if you take an Oncidium type, he says grab him one. Now the rhizomes on Oncidium types in the main are almost invisible, but they are there because the bulbs are touching each other, yeah? And the spikes come out from what I call the bract leaves. Let's find one that I can get that's got all the component parts. If you look at this one here, you've got the leaves coming out the top, normally two, and then you've got the bulb showing, and then you get the next two what I call real leaves. Those are the next ones down in the sequence, and then you get some smaller ones, and sometimes they really are small, nothing more than a covering at the base of the bulb. The spikes come out down there, they don't come out of the top, yeah? So they come out from effectively the base, but they're inside one of those bract leaves, one of those small, not properly formed leaves, the little ones at the base, and the spike comes out there. And I'll say spike, but in some cases it's spikes, because some of the Oncidiums, like my Sotoanum, in one case pushed out 3 spikes from one side of the pseudobulb and 2 from the other side. 5 spikes on a single bulb, so it's not always one. But quite a few of the Oncidium types will only produce 1 spike per bulb. Very, very rarely do you get 2. So that's those. Dendrobium blooms can come out from almost anywhere. Depends on the type. Phalaenopsis type and Latoria types tend to push their very first blooms straight out the top. Yeah? But then subsequently they can produce more spikes from lower down the cane. But they do tend to be at the top of the cane, or very near the top of the cane, not halfway down or near the bottom. And therein lies the main difference with the nobile types and their offspring, because they produce buds right down the cane. And out of the more common ones that people grow in the home, that's the one people are most likely to have. And their nodes, where they produce their little spikes and their buds from, are in the gaps between the leaves, opposite the leaf. So you get a leaf there, and a leaf there. That's the node opposite that leaf on the other side of the cane. And then it moves up, so the buds come out alternate sides like that. And then you get what I call the long cane or deciduous type dendrobiums that dump all their leaves in the winter, most of the time. They produce their buds in a similar way to the nobile types, but most of the time there are no leaves to be opposite, because the leaves have long since fallen, but they do follow the same pattern. The buds come out in a node that doesn't even exist for a while. You can't see it until it starts to grow, because they're covered in sheaths, yeah? But it's still opposite where a leaf once was. So that's those. What else have we got in here? Vandaceous types. You happen to have one? Oh, no, I'm not showing you that. Oh, God. It's my new Renanthera, as it's a small one. Vandaceous types push their spikes out from down there, not that bit, very rare. On lower leaves, preferably, I would say at least 5 leaves down, yeah, 2 pairs and the one that's currently growing. But they push their spike out right down from the base of the leaf, straight out there. And it'll normally run along the top of the leaf for a while and then head off towards wherever your light direction is, or upwards. Yeah? So Vandaceous types tend to push their spikes out from away from the crown, part way down, on either side, sometimes 2, sometimes 3, sometimes 4 at once. Some of them only ever have 1 spike at a time, and it will normally alternate. 1 year that side, next year that side. And then it'll gradually creep up. And they gradually follow the leaves up, but a little lower down. Vandaceous types. What else have I got in here? I can only go with what I got. I haven't really got much else. Restrepias, they grow a new growth with a leaf on the end. Yeah? And the blooms come out from the base of the leaf underneath. They're a little unusual. So the blooms come out underneath the leaf. 1, and that dies off. Most of them, another 1, that dies off, another 1, and they just keep going out from under that same leaf. And sometimes you'll get a strange looking shoot coming out that's a kiki, and then you get another leaf on the end of that, which will have blooms coming out from underneath. Masdevallias tend to come up from the base of the plant somewhere, often from a sheath, so slightly up from the base, along a new growth coming out of the sheath. Draculas, in the main, come out the bottom of the plant and point downwards. So if you plant them in a solid pot, you ain't going to see any blooms because they need to escape. So they need to go in some sort of basket with lots of holes in so the spikes can come out and let the bloom hang downwards. What else have I got? I'm nearly there now. I don't think I've got much else. No, that's about it. Phalaenopsis, effectively they work like Vandaceous types, even though they may not look like it, but they are monopodial. You know, they have a single growth upwards with leaves coming out either side. And they'll push their spikes out closer to the base than the top normally, but again you can get several at once. But they tend to come out again in that leaf joint where the leaf joins the base, the spike will come out of there. And that's about, Tolumnias, I suppose I could mention Tolumnias, but who can guess why I don't think I need to, because I've already done them. These were once classed as oncidiums. So where do they push their spikes out from? At the base of a lower leaf. Yeah? So those used to be called equitant oncidiums, and then they were given their own genus. So that's that one. The other one I'm going to leave for another time because it's a chat about an orchid type. So all the care and all that sort of stuff. And that's a longer one. So there we go then. Orchid. It's funny, it's viewers' orchid question time. And at this point, I can almost substitute viewers for customers. Because that's how I see it at this point. You're my customers. Yeah, I'm doing business with you, if you see what I mean. And that's just YouTube, because I get paid. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. But viewers is good. I am sure I have many, many viewers who've never written a comment, but they still watch. And they're still appreciated. You don't have to write a comment. It's the views that count. And I hope you like the channel. Yeah? It does vary. We've got the Everything in Bloom, we've got the various series that I do, the Sunday chats, new blooms, and things like unboxing. But of course I'm not doing any of those, am I? Because I'm not buying any orchids. See you next time.